Today we have Mark. Mark Carmichael is the owner, writer, and researcher of the 116th Battalion Crown Canadian Expeditionary Forces Facebook group. He's the owner, writer of the Heroes of the Great War Substack page, and author, producer, and orator of the Heroes of the Great War podcast. He's also the social media manager for the Central Ontario branch of the Western Front Association and contributing writer for their magazine, The Maple Leaf. In the evenings and weekends, that's when he accomplishes all of this. His days are spent leading a team of sales professional, where he proudly boasts a 32-year long career in the Canadian telecommunications industry. Mark and his spouse and partner Nicola are the parents of 3 children. Mark holds a Bachelor of Honors in History from the University of Western Ontario and continues to be a passionate Canadian historian with a keen interest in both military history and the human impacts that war and warfare have on both individuals and the societies which called upon them to serve and sacrifice in their cause. So please join me in welcoming Mark. And that should be you. Good to go, Mark.
Well, thank you very much. Just make sure we are sharing my presentation here. Just I guess it's once it pops onto the screen.
You're all good. Yes, you're up and running.
Oh, there we go. Excellent. I'm going to kind of take everyone on a little bit of a journey, and I'm going to start off with this is my opening screen is AI at its finest. I'm a new proponent. I was trying to have a starting screen that kind of reflects the a combination of what those cemeteries look like today out there, and in an image of one of the soldiers in his contemporary uniform. And I'll talk to you a little bit. I'll walk a little bit about kind of what I do and why I do it, and what I'm trying to help and promote with what I call is the cause of remembrance. And we're going to take us back to year 1997. And I could say that it was your screens will change in a second, but I could say it was hot and I was parched and I was tired. I had just traveled from Toronto to Brussels, and from Brussels to Ghent, to all the way over to Cambrai in France, and I was standing outside of a train station with a map in my hand, and on that map there was an X, and on that X it said Saint-Alé British Cemetery. And it was about 5 kilometers away, so there I was with my backpack, and off I go trying to find this spot. Saint-Alé was a place where my great-grandfather was buried, and I was the first person in the family who was going to make that journey, that pilgrimage, to go find him. And off I went, and I went to gauche and a droite and back and forth and getting lost. I didn't know where I was until some helpful bus driver comes by, and he asked me a question. I didn't know what he said because I don't speak very well French. But he jumped in, he told me to get on board, and he drops me off along this cobblestone path about 3 kilometers down the road. And I walked down that path, and honestly, it was about 400 meters. It wasn't small, but it was an ancient path. And I walked down there, and I got to the end, and to my left was the most perfect, pristine cemetery, a Commonwealth War Grave cemetery you'd ever seen. And this picture was taken on that day. And if you ever seen one that has the if you ever been there, not a blade out of grass, flowers neatly pruned in front of the tombstones. I was astounded. And I went to look for my great-grandfather, and he was directly in front of the cross of sacrifice. So interesting. I had gone halfway around the world. I was standing in front of my great-grandfather, and I was more interested. My eyes turned to the guy on his left and to the right and left of them. Corey Norton and Joseph Vaillancourt, Don McLean, and Ernest Henderson. I could go down the list. It was an interesting point. So I took the selfie, the one on the screen here, and went up and down the rows, and I read aloud the names of everyone in that cemetery. I walked out the gate, a different person. And you think about this, this is I competed, this is when I was a young, I had my backpack on, I did my tour of Europe, but in time, that interest and that fascination with the other people, the guys to the right and left of him, continued on. And so what it is in 1990, in the year 2013, they started to release service records of soldiers. And I wanted to find out all the guys who were killed beside my great grandfather. So I downloaded 96 soldiers in that cemetery, and I tried to understand and take records of everyone in that cemetery that was around my great grandfather. I completed that task, but then it expanded to everyone in the 116th Battalion's Roll of Honor. Now he fought and served with the 116th, killed with the 116th. So I decided to research everybody in that, and I started creating a database of it. Where there's like 75 lines of data. I'm thinking this is something maybe I could use in the future. So I think I have almost 3,500 soldiers in that database. So time's ticking along, and then the year 2020 hits, and as we know, COVID hits, and where I am sitting today is where I was then, barricaded by about 3 feet of toilet paper rolls, trying to protect myself and my life from the nasty vid. And but in my time, as I'm barricaded here, I'm telling to myself is that life is it could be so fickle. And I've always wanted to be a writer. I always wanted to be a historian. I said at that time I'm going to start doing it. So what I did is I started writing mini biographies of soldiers from the 116th. I started with the lieutenant colonel, the commander of the 116th, a guy named Samuel Simpson Sharp. And I continued to write and write and write. And but then I created a Facebook group, the 116th Battalion Facebook group, that's grown to 600, and as of this morning, 614 members. And I even went throughout their I went through their battalion diaries. I'm doing day-to-day contextual accounts of the diary. I'm trying to develop new battle histories. I'm just diving right into it from 2020, 2021, all the way up to present day. I even actually worked on an English translation of a book that was created and published in 1929 by a Norwegian Canadian soldier, and I helped on that translation. So I'm really just diving into everything I can about Canadian soldiers and I'll talk a little bit about these bios in a bit, but I really want to talk about kind of what I was doing. And I'm getting a 1 second. My screen is my screen is frozen. So
Okay, I was gonna say all we see is a white screen. So
yeah, so same with me. Let me stop share, and I'll share again. And just let me know if you get if we're
yeah, there's your master presentation.
there. We go. Resume slideshow. My apologies. This is technology and it's
Can you hit escape or exit that?
yeah. There. Share. Um, I am it is
Oh, yep. A couple options. Escape again, Mark.
yeah.
Try sharing.
1 second. Here, I'll just escape this from current slide.
Wait.
My apologies. This is not good. go. I am. It is not coming up.
Why don't we not worry about slideshow mode? Can we just look at the slides and kind of the composition mode?
Yeah, it's my once I have a backup here. 1 second. I have a secondary computer just in case. And then I'll 1 second. I'll just because my basically the whole screen's frozen. Wait, let's see if I can get this. No.
Murphy's Law and all that.
These things do happen. So let me see if and just like this.
I'm glad we didn't say what technology company you work for.
Exactly. Well, there we go. Let's see if this slideshow from current slides. See if I'll share again. Let me know if you're seeing on the screen. My apologies. Yeah. Okay. Easy peasy, right? This is so let me go into presentation mode. Resume slideshow. Let me know when everyone sees on the screen.
Yeah, I can see it there.
Okay, so here we are. We just take about a 3-minute. It only cost 3 minutes there. I thought that was a pretty good recovery. We'll see if that actually works though. So here I am, 2020, and as part of my COVID, I guess, treatment program, I start bringing my kids out to cemeteries looking for men from the 116th. And you'll see on the screen here what my phone looked like once once I started reaching each of these cemeteries. I'm going from everywhere across Ontario. I've hit in about 250 cemeteries, everywhere from Kingston to Gananoque to Montreal, Toronto, all over Ontario, trying to find members of the 116th. But there is a kind of a purpose to it, and what it is I'm trying to uncover some of the stories behind the individuals who are buried in these cemeteries. My first, one of the first cemeteries I visited was in Uxbridge, and the guy who's on the cover of my book, a guy named Sam Sharp, I went to his cemetery in Uxbridge. But then I also continued up to every cemetery that I could basically pass. I'm doing U-turns down highways. I'm trying as best as I can to just identify and visit as many of these guys as I can. It was a family event, so I bring in my daughters to all these things. We're going up and down rows looking for soldiers, trying to uncover who they were, and it's amazing that we have to realize that all these places that and you'll see on the screen the places that I visited, whether the folks that are on cenotaphs or memorials within cemeteries, or even major cemeteries like the Woodland Cemetery in Hamilton, the York Cemetery in Toronto, Mount Pleasant. There's the St. John Norway Cemetery in the beaches. There's a ton of our Great War soldiers are buried there, and these are the ones that were able to get back. They were able to come back to Canada and be able to, and they survived the war. So while this is what it ended up to be a pretty interesting COVID project for me, I got to realize these are the ones that made it back. But as most important is that when we get to some of these other memorials, and you conduct a trip that I did, which is going over to France in this most recent falls. These are the ones that didn't. And in I'll start off with one of the first slides you're going to jump on here is it's a picture of the first cemetery, one of the first cemeteries I saw, called Le Target. And you'll see that there's 14,443 soldiers buried in this French cemetery, and right beside it there's a British cemetery, 638. At Tynecott has not only almost 12,000 soldiers buried in the grounds, 12,000. Another 35,000 men from the British armies have their names on the wall, and their remains were never found. So they're limited to having their name effectively carved in granite or in stone all across. And this happens when you go there. It starts to sink in the immensity of the catastrophe. 9,400 at Vis-en-Artois, which is the 100 Days Memorial. Tite-Val, 72,337 soldiers on that memorial. The numbers almost become almost incomprehensible when when you walk up there, it's just names, name after name after name after name. And by kind of where I'm standing is that I want to, in order for us to truly remember, to truly ensure that we don't forget, is that we have to find out who these men were, who these individuals were, because there was even a lot of nurses over there. We need to uncover their stories, share their stories, and make sure that we, as Remembrance Day comes on an annual basis, that it's more than just, really, it's just more than Vimy Ridge. It's more than just one event that we celebrate or remember. We have to remember all these individuals and their individual stories. It provides us with connectiveness back to an event that happened that was instrumental to Canadian history. If you look at this, these are all pictures that I took when I was over in France, and I also, one of the interesting things that happened over there, and it's reflected in some of the stories I tell, they're not only related to people who look like me, and that's important because I'm going through some of these cemeteries, and one of the first cemeteries I stopped off at had all Egyptian soldiers, men from Egypt who are fighting with the British on the Western Front. And then there's a lot of there was a whole bunch of other soldiers from India, and there was Chinese laborers who I tended to find them in almost all the cemeteries. These are just stories that they're evidence of the human record that we have and what happened over there, and we need to make sure we could better understand it, so we could tell our children, and they could tell their children about a seminal event in our global history, especially Canada's history. And this next slide just talks about, to remind us, and that Tom was mentioning about visiting one of the German cemeteries over in that region. In each of these, each of the crosses in a black cross in the German cemetery has 4 names written on it to represent 4 German men that are soldiers that were buried in that cemetery. 44,833 just in Nouvelle Saint-Vaast. But I'll bring it back from, like, the immensity is huge, but let's bring it back to my personal mandate, and it will go back to Saint-Alais on that first trip, in the fact that this was one of the last cemeteries I visited on this most recent return. 98 soldiers, I think it's 96 soldiers. It's a typo there, in Saint-Alais. 68 of them for the 116th Battalion, all killed within effectively a 30-minute time frame. And it's, in order to understand that, you have to dig into the individuals. You have to tell the stories. The Canadian stories. Vimy Ridge has 11,169 names on it, where we don't know it, all they are is names on a wall until we go and we do the research to uncover so much more about who they are. And it will, once we understand who they are, we're going to be able to tell our story, our family story, our personal stories to the next generation. Now I'm going to just jump on and just because I did jump into my presentation, a little bit of a hiccup there in the middle once it looks like some of the cords got dislodged. My name is Mark Carmichael. I'm in the daytime, I am as I say, I'm a titan of business. I run a sales team at a big telecom company, but in the evening, I'm a basement historian. This is my office. I'm surrounded by books. I spend all my time trying to understand and tell the stories of ordinary soldiers, ordinary people. My mission and mandate is to bring to life the names that are carved in stone. That's something that I've been focusing on since COVID, and I want to continue it on through telling the stories through these little mini biographies that I write. They're around between 8 and say 15 pages long. I've actually written 149 of them so far. They're not just related to the 116th, but they're related to many people that help me explain Canada's Great War history from all different components, with a focus on not just officers and senior staff, but the ordinary soldiers, the people who would never ever make it into a history book, just people just like ourselves, like our neighbors, like our uncles, like our friends and family. We'll want to tell because that's who it was in the time of the Great War. I also want to make sure that the stories, they're unique, they're compelling, they're interesting, readable, and relatable. I'd like to say I'm more of a writer than I'm a historian, but I do spend a lot of time doing deep research into history. But I really want to tell the stories so that resonate, so that people can really understand and want to read more about these just fascinating stories that have been remained hidden for over 100 years. Most important, I want to make sure that they're human, because in order for us to relate to them, they need to relate to us as humans, and not just being a storytell of so and so did this at this time and kind of a listing of all the things they did. But they are because I need to make sure that they satisfy the historian. And to me, they have to be meticulously researched. They include maps, photos, books, articles, quotations. I do spend far too much money on ancestry.com, but I do this to make sure I have a full understanding of who these people are. Pictures, stories about their brothers or their fathers, quite often who they served with. It gives a better understanding of how just a normal everyday person, the normal everyday Canadian, what their life like was back then before they put up their hand, volunteered, and went off to fight for their country. But I also want to make sure that just because I do think that our collective limitation and knowledge of the Great War tends to be on just a few things. Billy Bishop, great Canadian hero. Many people don't know many other Canadian soldiers, but other than him, they know Vimy Ridge, but they don't know the Battle of Drocourt-Quéant, which was by Currie's named as probably the hardest battle that Canadians fought in the Western Front. We need to dig a lot more to tell that story about Passchendaele, to know just the misery that these guys went through, so we understand it a bit more. We have to understand and relate in order to make sure that we maintain that interest, and again, tell the stories to the next generations. And finally, one of the pieces that I also recognize is that, again, all the soldiers don't look like me. I've done some great little biographies on First Nation soldiers. On one of the oldest, one of the black soldiers was the oldest living man with 116th. I think he died at the age of 98. There's a lot of foreign volunteers who whether they be through Russia or some Australians. Some I actually have a few Mexicans, Italians who emigrated to Canada, put up their hand and fought for their new country. I want to make sure I tell their story because it's unique, it's interesting, and it's relatable to some of these individuals who's also their families have also done that emigration from faraway places to Canada. I want to talk the story about all Canadians. So what I call is a cause of remembrance is what can we do? What can you do? And then one of the things that I want to promote and talk about is that participation is most important. We all have almost all Canadians have ancestors who fought in the war, whether it's with us, whether their forefathers or foremothers were here in Canada or were in places far away. Everyone has a Great War connection. And it's important to tell those stories. So join some of the Facebook groups that are dedicated to retelling these stories, sharing these pictures. I run the 116th Battalion one, but there's so many more that I urge everyone to go on to Facebook, join the groups, and start participating. I did work on some podcasting last year. I'm going to be doing some more this coming winter. But there's tons of podcasts or YouTube channels that you could visit. There's Instagram and X and all these different avenues to just try to broaden our horizons and understandings of the Great War. And then there's also so many local museums that I think that are dedicated to tell certain regimental stories. Again, I talk a little bit about one of them, but there's so many others that provide a more of a regional perspective of all the soldiers from that region that joined up, whether it be the Lawrence Scots or the Royal Canadian Regiment, the Ontario Tank Museum. The Ontario Tank Museum is one of the hidden gems of a museum in Ontario or Canada. It's in Oshawa. It does happen to be the 116th Battalion Museum because the 116th were perpetuated by the Ontario Regiment, Armored Regiment. But you can't go better by going to a museum that has over 100 tanks, honestly, and just you get to explore them, walk around them, touch them, feel them. It is a fantastic museum to go visit. I also urge you, if you're interested, I'm part of the Central Ontario branch of the Western Front Association, a whole group of geeks just like me who are just focused on trying to perpetuate and promote Canada's history from the experience during the Great War. We meet probably 2-3 times a year up in Oshawa. It's a fantastic opportunity to share your interests with people that are also dedicated to preserving and protecting Canadians' Great War history. And really, my call is to make sure you share the stories. Share with me. I'll help maybe write biographies that I could promote to on my pages. I think it's so important to be able to tell the story to the next generation. It will come up on one of the next slides here as it pops up is some of the online resources that are available. If you do and are interested in trying to uncover a little bit about more of your family's histories, there's tons of online resources that are available to find some information that you may have not have known before. I call it kind of turning over rocks of your own family history and uncovering stories that have remained hidden for over 100 years. So there's lots of opportunity out there. If you're interested and you're maybe you need a little help, I could provide my email address either through Facebook or Substack or direct. Let me know. I'll help anyone who's interested. It's kind of what I do for fun. Other people like everyone has a hobby. I like to research Great War soldiers, and most importantly, I think is support your Canadian historians. We've just lost one of the greatest historians that Canada has been able to ever generate, a guy named Tim Cook, and is a gaping hole in our ability to tell our story. He lost a 15-year battle with cancer most recently, but his contributions to our story are immense. There are some others that Ted Barris and Matthew Barrett and Rod Henderson. There's others that are historians who are focused on telling our story, and I urge everyone to support them, because you're never going to be a millionaire if you're a historian, but you will make sure you inform and entertain lots of folks out there. It'll jump up a bit of one of the results of my efforts here is that a lot of my readers were asking me to put some of the stories into a book, a tangible form. It's a lot harder to read them just online, especially when if you're using Facebook, it's a linear application. So if I wrote something 2 years ago, it's almost impossible to find it. In 2024, I put the 25 of those stories into a book. I'm going to be creating volume 2 in 2026. I have about 80% of them written, but I've so this is I think it's again this is just an opportunity to sharing these stories with people, family members, and such who are interested in something that's just interesting, readable, relatable. I'll just throw up on a slide here. You'll see it. That I have some quotes on, and I put it up there because I like to. I want to make sure that people realize that this is something that is that's provided value to others. And the most important one here, I think, is I love the fact that Tim Cook was the first guy who got a copy of my book and provided feedback on it. And he said they've done something really important here. And I want to make sure that this is something that can provide value to other people who are trying to learn a bit about more of Canadian history. But I'll just jump onto where I want to move this to is just some of the stories. I'm going to talk about 3 stories if I think we have enough time. 3 of the stories that I've included into the book. The next picture is when it pops up on your screen is 3 individuals who are 3 individuals who are sitting in their house enjoying histories of the Great War. And if you want to take your own picture of yourself enjoying it, I'll make sure I add you for the next presentation that I give, because I do give these presentations to schools, to Legion halls, to Lions clubs, history societies. I think it's just fun, right? So, anyways, the first story in the picture that you'll see on the screen is it's my use of AI in trying to describe what I was writing about. And the story is about Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Sharp. And you can see it looks the picture in the community in the background is supposed to be like a small town, like Uxbridge is where he is from. And they did have a long procession of soldiers, and Sam was on a horse-drawn cart. But as you can see, the 3 officers, they're either walking away from the cemetery or they're doing the moonwalk all the way to the funeral. But this is another example where AI is not 100% perfect yet. But my first story will be on Sam Sharp, and the reason why I really wanted to write his story is I learned about him in his particular. He died by suicide in this May of 1918. He has an interesting story, and I delved into it a little bit with my research, but I heard about him first by Aaron O'Toole, the former leader of the opposition, had got a plaque to be commissioned in Sam's honor, just to make sure that we tell his story, because it's important. It's another layer of Canada's history that we've forgotten. We chose to forget because of the nature of his death. He died by suicide in Montreal of May of 1918. we chose not to tell his story for the next 80 years. And he died by it was post-traumatic stress disorder. But I'll tell a little bit about. I'll step back and I'll tell you kind of what happened. Now, Sam was the one picture in the bottom here is a he was a lawyer and a member of parliament. He was a member of parliament for Ontario County. He was also a major in the 34th Regiment. So when Sam Hughes was looking to raise regiments in the year of in 1915, 1916, Sam wanted to raise one from Ontario County, which is it's from Uxbridge and Oshawa, Whitby, all the way up to Sunderland, Cannington, Beaverton, kind of cottage country, just below cottage country. So Sam got the approval. He went around to a lot of his friends, a lot of his close friends. He was a Mason as well. He got a lot of the guys from Lodge to join. He got a lot of members from the 34th to join. He got a lot of friends to join, and he trained them. They went over to England, and what happened quite often to the 116th, it happened to many battalions. They started to get broken up. Three of the four companies that comprised of the 116th were sent to other units. But by the force of Sam's kind of political connections, he was able to save that unit. And in February of 1917, the 116th landed in France, and they were put into the 9th Brigade of the 3rd Division. What soon happened, although they were at Vimy Ridge, they're in reserve, but they got their baptism of fire in July of 1917. And on that day, Sam lost 5 of his officers and 25 of his men. It was looked upon as a successful raid, but in retrospect, very, very costly. When you start losing those types of men, and then you reflect on who Sam Sharp was. Sam loved his men. He was connected to his men. He was quite often related to at least 3 members that I know of the battalion. One of them was his nephew, who was killed on that day, on that attack. And he would write these really emotive letters back home to the families, to the wives of the fathers, the mothers of the slain men. And he would write them. He wrote those 30 letters from the first fight, but then he wrote another 25 at Hill 70, and then he would write another. I think it was another 25 or 28 at Passchendaele. By the time of Christmas of 1917, Sam Sharp lost 122 men under his command. He lost another 80 that were fighting that were transferred away from the 116th to other units. Guys he enlisted. He got them to volunteer. He personally brought them on board, so they're friends to his. And unfortunately, with the cumulative effect of all these letters in the desk, one after another, it started to break him down. Break him down. He had a nervous breakdown in or kind of around December, January of 1918. And he was they called for his wife. His wife came over and met him in England. He still couldn't recover at a hospital, lost a lot of weight, and they sent him home to Canada to recover. And in May of 1918, May 22nd, he arrived at Halifax. He went to he took the train to Montreal, got off the train, admitted himself into the hospital, and in a moment when the nurses and his wife and his doctors weren't looking, he leaped out the window to his death. And his story wasn't told for the next 80 years. I wanted to uncover that story, and I thought it was important enough to tell his story, and that was the cover story of my book. One of the other things that happened during COVID is the history meetings like this, which we're doing online. We did our Western Front Association meetings also online, and it was during one of these meetings that I heard about a name of a guy named Alfred Atke. Now, the interesting thing about Atke was that he was apparently one of Canada's aces, the fifth highest scoring ace for Canada in World War One, and the 35th highest of all combatants. He had 38 victories to his name in World War One, and no one had a clue. I didn't know who he was. No one really had an understanding of who he was, or the average person didn't. And he was buried 10 minutes away from my house. So the first thing I do is I toss my kids in the car. Off we're going to looking for soldiers in a cemetery. And my daughter and I walked up and down row after row after row after row for an hour and a half trying to find the final resting spot of Canada's fifth highest scoring World War One ace. And it was hour and a half later when finally, and at the bottom here, you can't really see it, but it's all covered with dirt and overgrown with grass. That's what I found. And then when I found him, I said to myself, I need to understand what happened here. I need to understand his story, because he's a forgotten Canadian hero, and there has to be more to it. I went into his not just his service records, but there's a website called aerodrome.com, and it all the aces. It covers victory, every single victory that every single ace was recorded as achieving in World War One on all combatants: German, French, English, South African, Australian, the United States, Canada, you name it, has everyone. And I did an analysis, and I found out an interesting thing. Alfred Atke, within a 30-day time frame, so in the middle of the spring offensive of 1918, he scored 26 wins in 30 days, which is an astounding amount. And it's actually 25% higher than the next highest scoring ace. So when you're looking at it from just a pure productivity perspective, he's someone that whose name we should know. He had he was decorated. He had a military cross. He had a military cross with bar. He was actually recording of him and another pilot taking on 20 German planes and coming out victorious with 6 victories to his name on that day. They're really interesting stories. So I tell his story in the book, and I think these things are because he's not known. There's an actual, I have it in my library here. It's called Canadian Airmen of the First War. It's a 2-volume series, and they're 2 inches thick. So Canadian Airmen, that's our whole story on Great War fighters. Alfred's name is mentioned in the footnotes on 1 page. So I had to tell a story. And it's included. In the third story that I'll talk to is a guy named Jack Eyre. Now, it's an interesting thing about Jack is he was a pianist. Before the war, all the movies were silent movies, except in the front row, they'd have a pianist who would play music to whatever's on the screen. When the war came through Toronto, he was a Toronto lad. He enlisted with the 169th Battalion, joined up, sent overseas, and was eventually sent to the 116th Battalion in the spring of 1917. And it was during one of the times when they were at rest in reserve, and he was at this event where they were seeing if anyone was musically inclined. Did anyone here know how to play the piano? So Jack put up his hand, and when he put up his hand, his experience in the war changed immediately. He was invited to join a group called the Dumbbells. The Dumbbells, the best way to think about the Dumbbells is many of us are familiar with Blackadder or Second City, Saturday Night Live, these skit-based type of Monty Python. Everything has an origin story. Now, I look back to in this, there can be connection. The Dumbbells were a vaudevillian type of skit-based song, dance, funny, satirical, dark humor type of act that played to the men behind the lines. Now, it wasn't that far behind the lines. They were still within shell range quite often, but they were there to give the men something to keep their mind off of what they just experienced out in the trenches. And it actually points to something interesting, that if you ask a lot of veterans in the years that followed the war, what they can remember, and it wasn't all the horrors; it was the fun times. And the dumbbells were one of those acts that provided smiles and good memories for the soldiers that fought in the front lines. And I wanted to tell Jack's story. Interesting thing about him is that he lived all the way to, I think he was around 86 when he passed away. But you could still hear you could still see some of his videos playing the Dumbbell Rag, which was a song that he made and was played throughout the war, even the years after the war. You could get a video of him playing that in the CBC. So in the bottom is a picture of all the guys dressed up, and they had some guys dressed up as girls, and it was a really important part of Canada's history, not well known, but it's part of that war experience. So those are three of the story. Again, in my book, I have 25 of them. The next slide is, again, AI's just version of saying of me trying to put pictures to words. One of the one on the top right is important to me because it's my grandmother and my great grandfather. So she's holding my great grandfather, and when his father went off to war. I have a story that talks about that because when he went away. My grandfather grew up not thinking that understand that he never got to meet his dad. Well, on the second day before he left for France, I have a picture of him, and it's in the book, of one of those rare and first opportunities where the granddad or my great grandfather was holding his son in his hand for the last time. So I try to tell these stories, uncover these stories. This First Nation stories, the story of a African Canadian, Black Canadian soldier. There's a whole bunch of ones that really my only intention is to uncover something different that allows us to explain Canada's experience in Great War story through the experiences of those who are there, who fought it. If you're interested, I have a QR code here on the Facebook page. Again, it's up to 100 or 614 members. I checked this morning, so I have to update this. But also, another way that I share my content, my stories, if you're interested, is I put them on the Substack. Substack is a online writers portal or forum. I put a lot of my stories under there. They're free to read. There's probably about 100 of the 150 on there, and but again, they're all about, say, between 8 and say 15 minutes in length. So they're not too long, but I invite you to jump online, have a read of it, and let me know what your thoughts are. Share it, help promote Canadian history. My mandate is only to tell Canadian history, Canadian story from the Great War. And finally, I just want to I'll just end it up with, here's just a few items that I haven't got to yet. I'm going to be continuing to write. Again, volume 2 will be out in 2026. And then I have so many other stories and ideas and thoughts and that need to be uncovered. So many rocks that need to be uncovered. We need to tell their stories. I encourage everyone to participate, tell your own story, make sure that our Canada's Great War history is promoted, celebrated, so that the memory of our great Canadian war heroes is preserved. I really appreciate everyone's time today and listening to me as I kind of talked about something I'm really passionate about. And I really appreciate everyone for taking time out of their day to listen to something that is, I think it's really, really important.
Well, thank you, Mark. Why don't you stop sharing your screen and
Sure.
then we'll maybe
Sorry,
take. Yeah.
Tom, could I just jump in for a second? I had a request. Mark, could you put up the slide again, just quickly, where you linked your YouTube? Um,
All right.
had I was just getting
Oh,
some
you
messages from people that they
from
weren't able to get to
the Facebook one
the QR
or
code fast enough. The Facebook one, yeah.
yeah, here's the Facebook.
So if you don't mind leaving that up for just a minute, and then we'll get
Sure.
you to. Typically, when we're asking questions, we get you to take down your slides, but
Excellent. Yeah.
just give
Well, I'm
people
just
one more
happy I was able
chance.
to get them back up.
So I think what might be happening is the little picture box is obscuring some of the QR code.
Oh,
So Mark, maybe
Right.
maybe you can send me in an email the URLs for those sites, and then I'll put them in the talk description. So we'll
yes.
capture that on
Okay.
the
Yeah.
page.
Or you just Google Facebook on like on Facebook, just Google 116th Battalion. Google or search on 116th Battalion. That's kind of where a lot of my stories are.
Yeah,
Okay,
I tried
fantastic. Thank you.
shifting.
So want me to
Sorry.
stop sharing?
Sure.
Perfect. There we
No,
go.
I was just saying I was trying to move the little postage stamps around, trying to unveil it, but it just leaves it there on the live stream. So, all right, we'll open up the questions. I don't know if my chat's not updating but Chris, you usually have some if our audience doesn't.
Yeah, so I'll just speak quickly to our audience first, if that's all right. I've had a couple comments from people that they've had trouble finding that chat, or maybe it's not working properly today. So, um, just a few tips. Make sure, obviously, you're on our YouTube page. Make sure you don't have that video in full screen. If you minimize it, you should see it there on the right. But if you don't see it, feel free to send me an email as well. The email of our site is inquiries@historysymposium.com. So you're welcome to send me an email with questions. I had one of our viewers was texting me questions, so I'll start there in just a second. But there's lots of ways to get a hold of us if for some reason that chat isn't working properly. So we still want to see those questions. So we're hoping that we can still get those in. So I'll start really quickly with this text message, so I can put my phone down for a second. So we had a text from somebody who was talking about his grandfather was killed at Passchendaele,
Mhm.
October 28th, 1917. He was at the 44th Battalion, New Brunswick Regiment, and just wondered if you knew of any, started with Facebook groups, you know of any Facebook groups that might be associated with that battalion, or even the 10th Brigade.
The uh, I'm not familiar with any of the East Coast battalion. There's not a lot of folks who have Facebook groups on the East Coast battalions. Um, but that I could definitely look into it. The as the 10th Brigade of at Passchendaele, my focus is on the 9th Brigade and 8th Brigade. So the 10th Brigade would have been just, I think, from what I understand, would have just been in the area just south of the Passchendaele of the sector that the battalions that I've been focused on attacked. It here's the thing is that when I look upon Passchendaele, if you go over there today, um, it's difficult to really understand and conceptualize what it looked like then, because it's a very busy farming area. I tried to one of the things that I try to do is when I was out there is try to find specific spots where the lieutenant colonel of the 116th, at the time he was a major within the 5th CMRs, he earned a Victoria Cross at one specific crossroads. So I went there and I tried to just conceptualize it, but didn't it's hard because it's again, as I said, it's in the middle of a very busy farming area, but there's a lot of online resources that can help especially when it comes, if your ancestor was part of that battle, you could really break it down to which day it was, where in the course of the battle was his platoon or his company engaged. In you can help really recreate what the experience of your ancestor was through some of the online resources that are available. So I that's something I probably, it's not easy to do, but it is something that gives a bit more story and contextualization to the experience of what your ancestor went through. I think that's something that maybe that's something that that if you're interested in me helping, I could definitely help too on that as well.
Well, thank you so much. And so I'll I mean, he's watching live, but I'll just keep texting with this viewer, and if he wants to get in touch with you, we'll certainly make sure that happens. So thank you. Um, I have to ask personally. You just said really briefly you pick a soldier at random, which
Yeah.
I found rather curious. Obviously, you started sort of with the with your father, or sorry, great grandfather, and worked out from there. But I wonder if you can tell us, is there somebody particular you're working on right now, and how you sort of came across that person?
Well, there's three pieces. One of the experiences I really wanted to start telling was that of a chaplain, because they're doing battlefield funerals, and they're also providing spiritual guidance. They're trying to keep. This is the war really had it destroyed that connectiveness to religion in so many of the soldiers. And these guys were in the front line trying to keep people together in the most horrific of experiences. So I am doing I'm in the middle of a biography of a guy named John Garbett. And so he's one guy. It's less random from him, but there is another piece where I want to tell the story of a nursing sister, and I was researching one of the other projects I'm doing is called Captain Briggs' Diary. Now, Captain Briggs was the medical officer for the 116th, and he left a diary and it no one knows about it, but I found it on a University of Victoria Island University website. I know many words there. It's the most fascinating diary I've ever seen. So, as part of my Substack, I'm doing 1 or 2 days of his comments, and then I explain it what it meant. And it's almost like it's a history of Canada's war from a doctor's or medical officer's perspective, and he names everybody. So he even names a lot of these nursing sisters. So I'm just picking the nursing sister at random that he's referencing, and one of them was a nursing sister who was killed in a bombing run in June of 1918. So that's the next one I'm going to her name was Jennings, I think, and I'm going to tell her story. And then the bigger one is I want to tell the story of George Perks, who is he was the commanding officer, replaced 116th Battalion Sam Sharp. One of the areas, again, another area where you can get information. I found about 150 hours of interviews of George Perks, because he eventually became the Governor General of BC and Minister of Defense under, I think it was Pearson. He was a big dude, and it provides about 20 hours of interviews of him talking about his Great War experience. They're all online, available. So I'm going through these so I could tell that story. It's different when you can hear the person. So I'm telling that, but some of the stories in the books, like I just picked three brothers. A good friend of mine his last name is Broad. 3 brothers that were named Broad were killed. So I said, I'm going to research these guys. I found out that the three brothers were schoolmates with Wilfred Owen. So if you're familiar with Wilfred Owen, he's basically the Shakespeare of the Great War poetry, and I made that connection of one of his most famous poems called Anthem for Doomed Youth. And when he talked about the words doomed youth, like I'm wondering if I get into his putties, I guess you could say, was he talking about like his schoolmates? There was 38 guys that he went to school with in grade school who were killed in the war.
Wow.
Like that's the stuff that if you start to try to get into their feet, get into their shoes, and understand what may be going through their minds, you can understand these events from a different lens.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff, and your mention of a padre or a chaplain,
Mhm.
fascinating. We have a mutual friend who reenacts a World War One
Yep.
chaplain, and I'm sure he'll be fascinated in that story as well. And it is really um, the First World War and its effects on religion um, are, I mean, of course, it could be an entire other topic, but it is a fascinating topic, and just from the soldier's perspective, but also from a civilian perspective, in 1920, 1921, trying to reckon with this colossal war, and turning back to religion in many ways. It's a fascinating.
It's a whole like it's actually the book that I referenced called From Man to Soldier, which was the Norwegian Canadian soldier. He wrote this as a response to All Quiet in the Western Front by Remarque. Because it was a German perspective, again, All Quiet in the Western Front is one of my favorite books of all time. Well written, just a fascinating story. But this guy named Newt Wurzwick, he wrote his response to it. And it just the last, say, fifth of the book or so, it just shows the erosion of his faith in religion and in God. And it is fascinating because it's a lot rawer from a Norwegian's perspective, who they're a bit more blunt than the average person. And it's right in black and white. I was reading that, I'm like, this is like it's an unknown masterpiece that really we need to make sure that like all historians should be reading that book. So.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting perspective. I look forward to reading the translation.
Yeah.
Um, so I had one final question for myself, and then I will make one last check to see if there's anything from any of our various chat groups. I'm wondering if there's anything, can I call it controversial, that you're finding in biographies? So one of the ones that we come across a lot um, in First World War, particularly medical records,
Mhm.
is maybe some medical information that the families don't necessarily want shared, right, about their great grandfather and why he was particularly in hospital. And I'm wondering if you're coming across any of that, and what you do with that information. If there's anything that's certainly maybe not even that perspective, but something negative that somebody might want to keep hidden. Have you come across anything like that?
They're just boys, but sometimes they were boys that were married and had kids. Um, I I don't really, in my biographies, I don't go into detail on that, but I do quite often do kind of mini one or two paragraphs on soldiers when I visit their graves. I take their pictures and then I go and I research who they are, and I do a little snippet. This guy from 116th, and quite often they had a little bit of dalliance in Paris on when they were on leave that came back to bite them, and I reference it, but I do it in my own way. So it's not I just do it more in jest and then veiled a reference versus or it's part of the war experience, and I'm not trying to call anyone out, but it's 107 years ago. If you're still embarrassed of it, I just think of that's the little bit of joy they had in a terrible, terrible time.
Yeah, maybe joy at first and then
Yes, it is.
fading soon after.
It-
I've got one more question for you. This is one I don't know, but somebody's asking if you know Pat Barker's Regeneration trilogy.
yeah,
It's not
no,
one I know.
very
Um,
good. It was
so
actually one
maybe
of the
another
first ones I wrote.
recommendation.
Yeah, because
Okay.
it reflects on Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Sassoon, and when they're together in they're being attended to by a guy named Dr. Rivers, from what I can recall, in Scotland, in Edinburgh. So there's an interesting. I've read that, but here's an interesting thing I found about in my researches is that the three there's a Sassoon, Owen, and Robert Graves. They actually got together once, and they went golfing together on an afternoon once. So they actually it was on a little course just outside of Edinburgh. So they spent in the interesting thing about that is that from whatever conversation they had on the golf course, the next week, Wilfred Owen produces Dulce de Cormest, which is probably one of the most haunting and important pieces of Great War literature that ever came out. And you just think about you get three of the best, some of the best poets together. They're out there knocking a ball around, and they're jiving, they're talking to each other, they're just getting to know each other, they're sharing ideas. And he came out with this piece a week later, which is coincidental. Either way it is, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, interesting story. So I'm gonna say I think I've covered all the questions, but I always close with if there's somebody in our audience and I miss your question, I will apologize. Sometimes they slip through. There are a few other people that have posted comments.
Right.
So we'll try to make sure that you get to see those as well. And I will just close by saying thank you so much for joining us. This is it's really great. As Dr. Brown, one of the comments, it's very important stories that need to continue to be told, especially as we're turning into, we're past the 100th anniversary and these stories start to fade. So thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to turn it back over to Tom.
I don't have much more to say other than thank you, Mark. Really appreciate that. Thank you to all our audience for joining us. If you're still on, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Those are things that help us and help Mark's great content be seen. So with that, I'm going to stop the live stream and hopefully we see everyone again when we're back in December. Take care.
Thank you.